Hey babe, how's it going? What's up, y'all? What's up, Kartik and Abudi? Never clicked the link so fast. Learning TypeScript and I suck. Don't worry, I'm trying to learn it a little bit better as well. Yeah, there's proof right here that Tina was first. You could try next stream. What's up, my email? Doing good. So I was gonna start with the basics and just try to like keep on talking about things that I know about TypeScript, and maybe we can all like learn new things together as well. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in TypeScript that I just don't know because I haven't had a chance to use it on a project or anything. But let me just keep on getting set up and wait for some people to stream in or join in. What's up, Donut Loop? Tesla, what's up? Kareem, what's up? How's it going? I never knew it was a competition to be first. It's always a competition. Like the one thing you can look forward to when a video gets published. Michael says, I love you. Okay. Well, welcome. What's up? What's up? That was the first of you in like... Okay. Anyway, let's just get started. I have a React project over here that's spun up in Vite. Now, I'm not going to try to use much of React. I don't know if I even need to have like the UI open, to be honest. Let me go ahead and clear out some of this stuff. I think there are some important things that kind of point out when it comes to TypeScript and React, so that's why I want to have a React project set up. But all this other stuff can go away for right now. What else we got here? Okay. Okay, so what is the difference between interfaces and types? I do believe I think interface might have more abilities to like combine stuff together. I have to look that one up. I might ask ChatGPT about that. I think a lot of people just try to use types wherever they can. But I think with interfaces you can like extend other interfaces. Just like a little bit different functionality, but like they're kind of the same. All right, so the first thing, TypeScript. People seem very intimidated by it, but really all it's about is just like adding types to things, right? So if I had a script here, I'll call it s.ts, and I were to have a function called like run, TypeScript allows you to specify what things need to go into this as the parameters of this function, right? So if this run thing needs something like an IP address, you can put IP here. And notice that the way that my tsconfig is set up, which is another thing that we'll try to talk about, some tsconfig configurations do not allow you to just put variables with no types, right? This says IP implicitly has an any type. And if you go to the tsconfig, you'll see that there is a, which one is it? Oh, I think there's like a, if you wanted to allow, I think it's called like a no implicit any, and you can say false. So if you're like trying to convert a JavaScript project to TypeScript, you can go into here and you can configure TypeScript to be less strict and like allow you to do things that the way that I don't recommend stuff. Because imagine if you have 1,000 JavaScript files and you try to convert them all to TypeScript, you'll have tons of errors everywhere, right? So the first step is like just convert your extensions to TypeScript. But I think I'm getting off topic, so let's delete that. So TypeScript allows you to type your parameters, your variables, your functions, and stuff like that. So I can go here and I say this is going to be a string, right? And now TypeScript is happy because if you hover over the variable, it says that this thing is a string. That's like, in my opinion, that's like 70% of it, right? 70% of TypeScript is like you're able to type your arguments in your variables. Let's also say it took in like a user. That could also be a string or an ID if you wanted to do an ID. Oops. Yeah, let's just do user ID so we can do like different things, right? So like lowercase number, that's another type you can use. And inside of this function, you can obviously do other things. Like I could return an object that has an IP, it has a user ID, maybe it has like an age of 30. Maybe there's some logic that goes in to look up the user information based on user ID, and it decorates an object that's returned by just giving it more information. I'll say like hobbies, and then that could be an array of like running, swimming. Okay, so the idea here is now when I hover over the function, notice that the function has an implicit type here, right? If you see this like colon here and then curly brace, TypeScript is basically looking at this function and saying, okay, what does this thing return? And based on what it's returning, you get some IntelliSense and some inference to know that this thing returns an object that has IP, user, age, hobby. So now down here, if I were to say my run is equal to run and just invoke it, again, here's another benefit of TypeScript. This is complaining because this thing requires 2 parameters. I guess you can call them arguments here. And since I'm not providing those arguments when I call the function, TypeScript tells you like, hey, you're doing something wrong, which means that we need to provide something to make it happy. So I'll just go ahead and put like a number here. So those are the main benefits, right? Like I would say like this is like 70% or 80% of TypeScript. You guys can argue against that if you want, but this gives you the ability to now like do IntelliSense on your objects, and you can actually get different things from it, right? If I were to click hobbies, TypeScript tells you that, hey, this is an array of strings. So if you try to like do something dumb, like, I don't know, call a method that doesn't exist, it's going to tell you that you're doing it wrong. Okay. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. I'm sure there's some questions too, but does this all make sense for people who have no idea how to use TypeScript? Is that an okay introduction of like why you use it, how you use it? Let me go back to chat real quick and see if there's anything useful. Someone says you can extend with types too. Okay. All right, so let's see. Okay, so now people are talking about types and interfaces inside of the chat. So I kind of want to like hit on that a little bit. So again, like when you hover over a run, this is a type, right? This is a type of object that has an IP, a username, an age, and a hobbies array, right? This thing is a type that's attached to this. But if you wanted to declare separate types, like let's say this function actually needs to take in a lot of different arguments, and you don't want to have a list of like 30 arguments here. Like let's say there's also, I don't know, let's say gender. That could be a string. You know, let's keep it at this. You know, I won't even do gender. That's a, okay, what do I want to do? No, let's just go back to hobbies. Let's do hobbies, and we'll say this is an array of strings. And we'll just delete this. So let's continue to talk about this point where all these things are types, but how do you manually declare types? What if this run command took a bunch of arguments? You don't want to have a list like this, right? Instead, you want this thing to probably take in some type of object called like options, and then you can type that options object like this. Only difference is that you're putting semicolons instead of, semicolons instead of commas here. And now this options object is typed as an object that has those things. Okay, so you can type everything, right? And this is a array that's typed to have strings. But what if we want to take this further? Let's say we wanted to actually declare a separate type out here, and I'll say run options. This is a keyword in TypeScript that allows you to create kind of external types. They're more explicit types. This is called like an implicit type, I believe. Well, this is also explicit. I'm sorry. This is explicit as well. But I think as a matter of preferences, sometimes you might need to pass this run options thing everywhere throughout your code base. So you might want to make this type and export it from one file, and you can import it from other files as well. But the beauty of that is you can take the type definition and you can go ahead and just put it right there. So now you have a type that's declared outside of the function, and it works the same way as we just saw it, right? This thing is complaining because I don't have, okay, this thing is obviously helping me out because this thing needs to do this now. Okay. Excuse me. So what else can I talk about? Now, if you look at hobbies, hobbies is an array of strings, but let's say we actually had like an explicit list of hobbies that can only ever exist in our system. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and make another type. I'll say type hobby, and I'm gonna make a list of hobbies, right? So I'll say running, and I'll say or swimming, and I'll say or programming. Okay, so what we did here is we just created an external type again, but now we now we define that has 3 different types that are allowed. Okay, so now instead of having hobbies be an array of types of string, we're going to use hobby here. I don't know why I call it IE. That's not even proper English. And what this allows us to do is when we start doing things that are bad, like this thing should be an array of hobbies. If I were to put another hobby here, like basketball, this thing, unfortunately, TypeScript's not always as smart as it should be. But this thing would, wait, what am I thinking about? Sorry, let me go back. I need to do it here when I call the function. Okay, sorry for confusing you all. So when I invoke this function, I'll go back to the chat in 1 second. Let's just go ahead and add some more stuff so that this thing is happy. So the run options need to be user ID, IP, and then we have hobbies, right? This thing, if I were to put basketball, notice that this thing complains now because this thing expects us to pass in running, swimming, or programming. So again, if I were to just put an empty string here and do a command space, you get the 3 types that are allowed, right? TypeScript basically tells you, hey, these are the 3 options that you have. You need to specify one of those, or you could just specify empty array if you wanted to. Okay. Let's go back to chat, see if there's any like really cool questions, but I'll continue just talking about random TypeScript stuff. Someone's asking, how did I learn JavaScript that good? I mean, I've been coding with it for like 10 years now. So you just end up learning every day. If you just learn one new thing, you're going to be really good after 365 days. So I think make that your goal. One day, learn and memorize one new fact or feature or whatever about JavaScript or TypeScript. I'm not sure what this error is. I'd have to have a more specific example, I guess. Won't we get the same results in JavaScript with JS docs? I think you can, but I don't think JS docs would be as powerful, and it's actually a lot more annoying because JS docs, you have to explicitly type everything. JavaScript, I mean, with TypeScript, like this whole thing has an implicit return type. I don't have to come up here and actually add one. I don't have to say returns an object. I don't even know how to do it here. Like with JS docs, you have to do this, and then you'd have to say, okay, this is going to be an object that has an IP, and then it has a user ID, and it has an age. Maybe there's a way to actually make this be a separate type, but it's just like you end up doing the same thing that TypeScript's going to do for you. So I wouldn't even, I don't know. JS docs just seems like extra work. Okay, let's keep going. Do you think AI will ever replace programmers? If it does, it's not just programmers, right? It's going to replace writers. It's going to replace artists. It's going to replace anybody who has some type of job that requires some type of creative like output, right? It's going to replace doctors. Like you could just type in your symptoms into AI and it's going to tell you exactly what medicine you need, what what operations you'll need. But I don't think we're there. It's going to take like years, right? I don't think it's there yet. So I wouldn't worry about it. When you start seeing people lose jobs because of AI, then I would be worried about it. Because we've had self-driving cars for like a long time, right? But it's not replacing anybody. Hasn't replaced like taxi drivers, hasn't replaced truck drivers. It's just stuff is really slow to be adopted by the population, in my opinion. Generic types is difficult. Yeah, I'll hit up on generics. Read somewhere AI will not replace humans. Humans will use AI. I mean, at some point they could. AI has replaced some forms. Anyway, let's stop talking about AI. What are the interfaces in TypeScript? I just know this question. Cookies, interface, describe objects. I'm trying to see if there's any question that like I could answer that's not too advanced. I want to kind of go like I have a certain way I want to kind of teach what I know about TypeScript, so I don't want to like jump ahead and start talking about stuff that's crazy. Yes, it's still relevant to learn web dev, okay? I think you all need to not be worried about AI. It's a cool thing now, but it's like it's not ready yet, so don't worry about AI. I'll continue your learning path. Could you go over the as cons keyword and let's see type interfaces? What's up, Conrado? Yeah, I always publish my streams to YouTube. Sometimes it takes like YouTube a couple of hours to actually like run through the video and like I don't know what they have to do to the video, but it does get published at some point, and you can go to my stream section to find it. All right, so let's continue on. There's something I wanted to talk about, and I don't remember what it was. I mean, I'm just gonna start doing some random stuff, I guess. So one thing is there's like more. Okay, let's just do interfaces, I guess. So there's another way you can declare basically the same thing by using an interface. Now, interface has a kind of a little bit different of a syntax. Like you don't need the equal signs here. You just put the interface here. And I believe I haven't really used interfaces in a while. I kind of use types wherever I can just because I find them easier. But I believe this is the same thing. You just provide an interface here, and now this thing is also going to tell you what you need to type in for the interface. Okay, the main difference that I know about interfaces and types is that an interface can like extend other things. Types can as well. I'll show you that with like union types, but I'll say like other options, and I'll say this is a age of 50. So with interfaces, you can extend other interfaces, I believe. Is it extends? Yeah. So now run options basically takes this interface and combines it with this interface. Okay, so it's kind of like object-oriented programming. We have like classes that can extend and implement other interfaces. But now if you look here, when I call run, this thing's complaining because I need to pass it an age of like 20 or something. And now it should be happy. Oh, I actually named, I put 50 here. Yeah, let me put that as a number. There we go. Now you can do the exact same thing with types, right? If I were to do a type, and let's just call these T's and I's so we can like differentiate between them for right now. You don't have to actually put the T's and I's in your production code, but this is just for this example. And the only reason I have an export here is because if I don't, I believe, oh yeah, I don't need the export anymore. So let's do the same thing. I'm going to add another type called T other options. And that is going to take in an age. Okay, and what I can do is I can have this type basically be this. And then I can use the ampersand and say this is also going to use the properties that are defined on this type as well. So now this thing is a combination of this and these types. Okay. Technically, I could have pulled this out to a T like combined options. Let's just do that. Let's just try to teach as much as I can. I could say T run options, and I could say T combined options is equal to, we are going to, why is this complaining? Oh, we're going to say T run options and T other options. Okay, so now this thing is, again, like I mentioned, it's a combination of these two types, and it requires that you have both of these on the object. So now down here, if I were to use that, it's again requiring the age. Okay, interfaces, I believe, also have the way a way to like do implements. Is it implements? I don't have an implements clause. Maybe not. Maybe that's only for classes. But I'm kind of a noob when it comes to interfaces. I just stick to types. I find them easier. So we talked about this ampersand, but there's also a way to do an or, right? So let's say you had a program, and there's multiple ways that you can run the program, right? You could run it with IP, user ID, and hobbies. Or if you wanted to, you could just run it with age of 50. Now, I know these parameters don't make sense, right? They're kind of just like arbitrary. So keep that in mind. But the idea is, let's say there's two ways you can run the program. I don't know why I'm looking up here. My camera's right in front of me. I don't know. Okay, so there's two ways I can run this. How do you specify in TypeScript to say that, hey, I can either pass in an object that looks like this, or I could pass in an object that looks like this? Well, instead of using the ampersand, I could just do an or here. I'm gonna go ahead and clean this up just a little bit. I'm gonna put that there. And now the thing that you pass in to this function, it's either gonna look like this. So it's gonna have an IP, a username, and hobbies, or it's gonna look like this, where it only has an age. And now notice both of these don't complain. Like, this is fine, because TypeScript is smart enough to know that, okay, you're passing in in other options in this instance. And in this instance, you're passing in a run options. How's my ZVT going? I haven't played StarCraft in so long. StarCraft is one of the games, like, you play it and you start getting like stressed because it's just so stressful, and then like you're like, I can't do this anymore. But I might get back into it at one point. I do miss it. It was a fun game. Really challenges your like thinking abilities. Yeah, so now this is complaining because if you look at options, it's either one or the other. It's not both. So then in your program, you're going to have to say, okay, if options, and then I think you can say like type of is, I have to look this one up, I think. Isn't like instance of? Someone can call me out in the chat. But I mean, what I'm going to end up teaching in a second is something called type guards, which I might have to look up. Is? I'm going to Google this one. So like what we're kind of getting into a little bit, like there's only a bare minimum amount of stuff you need in TypeScript to like be able to make web applications. When you start getting into like building lower level libraries, this is when you have to like start learning about generics and learning about all this other stuff. But what I basically want to do is do a type guard so that if options is a type of like the one that only has age, and maybe I'll rename this. I'll say T options only age. Let me check chat. I'm sure someone will tell me. Instance of is only for class. There's a kind attribute. You should use a kind attribute in this case. TypeScript kind attribute. This is one of those things where I know I've read about it and I learned it. Instance of type guard. Okay, well, this is what I was end up going to try to teach. So what you could do is you could have something called a type guard. And like I said in the title, I'm trying to learn new stuff as well. So don't come in here and think I'm like a TypeScript guru, okay? So a type guard, basically you can take in something. Like I could potentially take in my run options. Sorry, I'm just reading some chat GPT. Okay, yeah, this makes sense. All right, let me refactor my code a little bit. I'm going to say this is going to be called options with IP. And then I'm going to make another one up here called type run options. Okay, and this is going to be the combination of this or that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make this function that says is options only age. This is super verbose, but it's going to take in run options like this. And based on if, like you can check a property, I guess, and you can say if age is inside of the options, then I believe you could say I'm going to return this. I'm not really, I have to like learn this a little bit better. But the idea of this type guard is you can check basically the object that's passed in. If it has an age property on it, then we're basically just having this function inside of whatever the block is that you're using this function. It's going to kind of cast options to this other type. I'm already confusing myself, so I'm sure I've confused everyone else. But let's go here and let's do it. I'm going to go ahead and pass in options here. And now I'm going to go ahead and just console log options. Actually, I don't think I even need the console log. I'm just going to go ahead and do this. So let's look at this real quick. When we call the function, it can take either one or the other. In fact, this is not right. It can take in run options. And if you hover over run options, it's either a options with IP or an options only with age. So then I'm calling a function and I pass in options. That function checks if the age property exists in options, then basically it casts the return value. Well, this isn't even the return value because it's returning a Boolean here. But it's basically taking the thing that's returned and casting it to a different type. And then anywhere in this block, you can use the type as the casted return type. Okay, so now we know that this thing is an age only options, and then you can actually just use it as that. So then we can do this and we can do this, and then like this stuff, you can kind of do some other stuff with whatever. Like this will have access to age here, but then it will not have access to IP, right? So let's just do this. This thing will have access to IP, but it won't have access to age. I guess I can't just do that. Let's just do this. Options.age. Bear with me. I'm trying to figure out how to even teach what I'm trying to teach. Okay. I don't know if I explained that well, but the idea is somehow you have to have a way to check different types to figure out what is the type actually a type of. Now, I will say that this seems kind of hacky. I wish there's a better way to do this. Like, because just checking a single property and casting based on that property seems kind of brittle in my opinion. But let me go back to chat real quick and see if anyone has a different suggestion of how to do what I just did. G says, first time catching a live. Thank you for your uploads. Yeah, no problem. I'm glad you guys enjoy my uploads. Can you show an example with type of react.useState in event listeners? Yeah, I could do that in a second. Yeah, I don't know. It's just something about this just seems very hacky. Because what if this thing, like, what if there's some overlap? What if this thing has an age in a name, but then this thing has an age of number as well? Okay. But now this type guard, it's only checking age, but really it should be checking age and it should be checking name in options like this. And then if you just imagine the scenario where there's like a bunch of overlap, how do you do this more automatically? This seems like a very manual approach like parsing through and differentiating different objects. Like, why can't TypeScript do that for us? Maybe there's a way, and if you know, put it in the comments. But that's my concern with this. It just seems kind of brittle. This anyway. Okay, so let's talk about optional arguments, because that's something that I think is important to understand. We talked about type guards. Basically, the is keyword and in keyword. You can check if something is in an object, and then you can basically change the type that's kind of used in the block of the if statement using the is keyword. Okay, let's go and let's just kind of go back to what we had. What do I want to teach? Okay, let's simplify this a little bit, right? So instead of doing like the union type, let's just change it back to something, a more simple example, because I think we're just going off the rails here with the complexity. And I'm going to go ahead and just show you something called the optional arguments or optional parameters, properties of objects. Can't even speak. Okay, so what if you wanted to call run, but you wanted to default the options to something if it wasn't defined, right? So let's say you could potentially do this or this. This is what we want to achieve. You can run it with either or. The way you can achieve that in TypeScript is you can put a question mark here, and that is going to make this thing optional, right? So you can either pass it in, or it could be undefined, which you can see here. It's putting this or undefined. So I do believe the money symbol is syntactic sugar for just doing this. At least I thought it would be. Is it really not? Okay, hold on. Maybe it's not. Okay, I guess there's something actually more going on under the hood with the question mark to make it happy. So let's just put that there. So anyway, if you hover over this, you can see that it either takes in a run options or it takes in nothing, undefined, right? So then in the code, you could then say like if options is defined, you can do some type of logic. Otherwise, you can do some other logic. But if you wanted to default it, again, this is just a normal JavaScript thing that you can do. Like you could default all these things inside of the actual like parameters list, like this, I believe. Parameters cannot have a question mark. Parameter cannot have question mark and initial. Okay, I guess you can't do that. I'm learning new stuff every day, huh? Okay, I guess we'll do this. We will say, wait, I think I put it in the wrong place. I feel like that should have been. Sometimes you put code in the wrong place, and where there's a way to do this. Am I crazy? Let's take a step back. I'm gonna go ahead and just like go back to what it was. Let's just do the rudimentary way, right? I'll just say like final options is equal to options, or you can default it back to like this if you want to. Okay, does that make sense? And then you can console log final options. Okay, so what I was trying to say is like you can run the function here, and then your code will just default it. But I'm pretty sure there's a way to default this thing. Like let's say this took in a name, which was an optional string, like this. And I'm gonna go ahead and just like print out string. I'm pretty sure. I think I'm just like messing up where you put the default. Let me go to chat. I think I'm just confusing myself. Options, your type is equal to that. I'm just reading chat real quick. It is right, you just need to remove the question mark. Okay, so I guess you just can't default it when it has a question mark. That's kind of like what they're getting at. But anyway, that's what the question mark is supposed to do. It gives you an optional argument or an optional property. So again, like let's say, let's go back to what we had here and let's make this required. Okay, so if you default it, does that mean it's going to automatically be set to an optional thing? Let's play around with this. If I were to do this, if I look and hover over options. Oh, okay. It automatically gives it the question mark. You see here? Okay, that makes sense now. Sorry, I was a little bit confused, but I'm catching up. I'm catching up. I'm telling you, there's probably TypeScript pros in the stream right now watching me, and they're just laughing. But that's fine. So, okay, what else do I want to teach? I wanted to teach, oh, you can also put the question marks on this run options too. So if you wanted to say that, for example, let's make hobbies optional. This would allow you to basically pass in your options here, and you don't have to put hobbies, right? You could just put this or this, and you can potentially have this on a bunch of different things, right? You could have like name is an optional string, age is an optional string, like this. And then you can pick and choose which of these optional properties you want to put onto the object. And this is useful because sometimes when you're dealing with databases, like there's some columns that are just like empty by default. You might not have those values. So when they come back from the database, you kind of have to set them as optional, and you can default them or something in your code if you need to. Cool. Okay, so let's try to do some type of like generic stuff. And in generics, again, like you don't have to use them that often when you're doing like web development, but if you start doing like library stuff, you end up having generics like everywhere. I'm trying to think of a good example of using generics though. What would I want to do? Let's try this. I don't know if I'll get this right. So let's pretend there's a function called SumDecorator. And this SumDecorator thing takes in some type of object, and then it needs to like return the same object that you passed in, but with a couple of different properties attached to it. So let's go ahead and just delete some of this stuff. And I don't know if I'll get this right. I didn't plan for this video. I'm going off of memory. So like a lot of this stuff, I probably won't get right. So you can specify these little brackets here. These are called generics. And you can specify tokens inside here, right? You could put whatever you want. A lot of people just put like a single letter token because it makes it a little bit easier to understand in the long run, I think. But I believe you can also put commas here, right? So if this thing takes in 3 arguments, like let's say it takes in A, B, and C. Let's do this. You can basically assign, I believe, the type. So B would kind of map to X, and then C, the type of C would map to Y, and the type of A, which in this case, it's an object with an IP and a user ID, would map to T, okay? And then you can kind of use those types in your code base and do different things with them. So I think this is more advanced, so let's just stick with one so we can keep this simple, and so I don't embarrass myself in front of you all by teaching you something wrong. But let's just keep it simple. Let's say we pass in an object, so some object, and this function needs to basically return the object, but then also add in an age of like 20, okay? So what we could do here, I believe, is type this as T. Okay, maybe that's something I didn't teach in the like 5 seconds ago. I do believe you do have to like specify the type here. And then when you call this method, notice that the return type of SumDecorator, like if I were to get like the object, let's say object dot, notice that it has the age and the IP and the user ID. So it basically took the type of the thing that was passed in and it combined it with this. I don't think this is even generics. I think this is a terrible example. Let me go back. Yeah, this is a bad example. Actually, no, maybe that was a good example. Okay, so notice, okay. Let me take a step back. Notice that if I just specify this thing as being an object, this thing only has age because TypeScript's not smart enough to figure out, okay, what was the type of some object? And can we combine that type with the new thing that we're adding on? Okay, so that's kind of like why the generic was kind of useful here, because it allowed us to take in the type of the first parameter and use that, and it kind of was able to figure out the implicit return type. So notice here it's saying this is an object that has IP and user ID and it has an age. Okay, I don't know if that was a good explanation, but that's kind of like what you can do generics with. Does anyone else have a good scenario for generics? I'm trying to think of what I could try to teach for that. What theme am I using? I'm using Bearded Theme Stained Blue. I spent 2 hours yesterday debugging type issues in a component that would have taken 2 minutes to write otherwise. This is the better DX we were promised. Yeah, I mean, it's when you're good at it, it's better DX, but I think that's the part that people kind of gloss over, is that you don't just become a TypeScript expert in like a couple of days. It takes like months to fully wrap your head around all this stuff, in my opinion, at least for someone like me. Like, it takes a long time to get decently good at it before you're just sitting there trying to figure out why your code is red. And I think this is a prime example. What Peter said, he spent 2 hours trying to debug type issues, which if you're using JavaScript, you could literally fix most of these bugs in like a minute because you don't have to worry about that extra overhead. But as the system gets larger and you have like hundreds of files and hundreds of data models, and you go in and you start deleting some properties off your data models, with JavaScript, your code won't tell you did something bad, right? With TypeScript, your entire code base will light up saying you should not delete this because there's 500 other places you're doing, I don't know, student.name, and you just deleted the name property from the student type. That's the real benefit when it comes to like larger refactoring and larger projects and onboarding, right? If you throw someone into a giant JavaScript project and you tell them to start adding functionality, like they're just looking at plain objects that have no types on them, and like it's hard. It's very hard to like understand the code base. There's no IntelliSense. At the very least, you could have JS docs, but could you talk about enums and how to use them? Yeah, I could try to do that. Have you ever thought about making a full course on React or other tech, like sell it or put it behind a subscription? Yeah, I'm actually working on a T3 stack one where I build that AI generator thing. I haven't worked on this in like weeks, but I was trying to make a course where I teach you how to build this. I was like, I have like a couple of hours of it recorded, but just got distracted. But you can join my newsletter, and at some point I should probably send out an email when I finish this course. I won't be showing you how to build exactly this application, but I will tell you how to hook up with Stripe, how to hook up with Amazon, how to deploy to Amazon, how to use S3, how to deploy to AWS Amplify for the UI, a lot of AWS stuff, how to connect to a database with Prisma. Anyway, let's stick to TypeScript though. Let's see, use object literals would be my recommendation. What's a high-level explanation for what a generic is? You can teach utility types. Awaited, promise, return type, omit. Oh yeah, those would be cool. Let's try to do that. But let's see, there's a lot of comments coming in. Too many comments. How would you handle user uploaded data whose properties we can't know or know the type of? Can you give me an example? Like someone's entering into a form Or are they actually like sending JSON to your backend and you have no idea what their fields could be? I think at some point you just have to add innies, right? Or like record types. Higher order component, for example. Allowing users to generate reports from CSVs, for example. And okay, use state hook would be a good example. Yeah, okay. Let's hit on this generics one more time for a more like realistic view of like what is a generic? Because again, this stuff can get kind of convoluted and it's probably more geared towards like you're writing a library. Like I don't think I've actually had to write that many generics in my code base unless I'm writing like a utility function or a helper. It usually boils down to functions, utility functions that I need to do something. But in React, okay, let's talk about generics. In React, there's state, right? So I could say count, set count equals use state. I'll go ahead and just default it to 0. Go ahead and auto import that. So in React, if you hover over use state, you get all this beautiful stuff that's impossible to read for a human. But the important part is that there's a generic that's implicitly defined for you right here that says number. Okay. So can we achieve the same thing in our other code? Like we wrote a function that looks like this. Can we achieve the same type? Let's try that. We're going to go here and we're going to delete all this. And I'll say export useState is equal to a function. Actually, I'll do this. I'll just say function useState is equal to this. So this thing takes in a parameter. So it could be some type of state variable, say state value. And again, we just talked about generic. So if we put a type here, now I'm going to call this my use state so we don't like get really confused between the React approach to it. But let's just go ahead and return some type of state value here. And then let's also return a function that is going to do nothing, but it's going to give you back latest state like this. Why is this complaining? They have void here? Probably. Okay, so we're basically rebuilding useState that React gives us. We're doing it ourselves because we're mad lads. All right, let's just say use my useState, and I'm going to call it with 0. So let's hover over this and notice that we get this generic here that says number. This thing takes in a number and it returns an array that contains a number as its first element and then a function. You know, now that I look at this, I think we could actually say as const. We might actually talk about as const here. Okay, well, we'll come back to the as const. I don't want to confuse you all or confuse myself. So again, if you look at this, it returns the same thing. It returns an array that has a number as the first element, and then it has some type of like react.dispatch. Whatever that has another generic, and that has another generic. The idea is that this is just a function though, right? React has a more React has a more explicit function and like has all types for it. But we're basically achieving the same thing here, right? This thing is returning an array of numbers or functions. Now, this isn't the same type definition. We want to make TypeScript more explicit about what it's returning, okay? We want TypeScript to say, hey, we are only ever going to return you an array that has 2 elements. If you look at this type definition that's implicitly set up, it's saying it's an array that could either be a number as an element or a function. So the issue with this is that technically, this is still going to like be the same type definition, right? But we don't want that. We want it to be an array that only has 2 elements. So there's another keyword you can do, say as const. And now if you hover over this implicit return type, notice that it has a read-only and has an array that has a single number in it. And then the second argument is a function that returns void. Okay. So again, the whole generic thing that we did, I could say count, that count like this. if I could type, and then this is going to be typed as a number, and this will be typed as a function that if I call it, it's going to be a number, which I can just console log like this. Now, why is this complaining? Argument has any... Oh, it's not supposed to return anything. I told it it's supposed to be void. So technically, I don't think that's 100% like React. I believe you can... I believe you're not supposed to do void here. You're supposed to return the same type or any or something. Probably T, right? Let's see. Why is this complaining? My brain's thinking. Give me a second. I think there's just... I think I need to probably... I'm going to say setter. I'm going to do this. Give me 1 second. So there's going to be a setter function here. That's going to basically do something. Actually, I think it should be void, right? I don't think it needs to return. You're trying to return a type. Why am I so confused right now? This is a function that you call. Okay, oh, okay. Setter needs to return a function. It doesn't take in a... This is actually a callback, right? So this thing needs to actually be... It's like a function that... My brain's hurting right now. I feel like I'm right there. Like I've almost figured this out, but like... So React is going to return a function, a callback function that you call, which you can invoke it like this. But when you invoke it, this thing needs to be a callback. I think my brain's almost there. So setter is a function that takes in a callback as its first argument. That callback is going to send you the latest state here, and then it's going to return... You have to have it return T or something. I think I did it. That was so hard. But anyway, we just kind of re-implemented a really hacky version of useState. Again, this wouldn't, like... Let's just make sure the types are good. Okay, so setCount is a callback, or sorry, setCount is a function that you pass a callback. So that's why we had to say it's a function that takes in a callback argument, which is typed as a function that takes in a latest state of T and returns a new state of T. Yeah, do I even need the arrows here? I think you do need the arrows. Anyway, did I just confuse you all? But what I'm trying to say is, like, again, it's cool to understand generics, but if you're just like learning React, the only thing you need to know about is like, okay, sometimes you can specify a generic here as like number. Okay, so in case you wanted to specify this useState as being like a number or null or undefined, I mean, you can do that, and you can just pass in the generics here. Okay, that's the overarching thing I wanted to teach, is that in React you can provide generics here so that React and TypeScript know, okay, this is the type of thing that you're trying to store in state. Now, again, for the most part, if you can just allow TypeScript to implicitly figure the state out for you, it'll save you some characters and be a little bit easier to do. But in some cases, you want state to potentially be undefined. So like this is when you might want to say like something like this, right? Because if you don't put this or undefined, if someone were to come along and have like a button that's like on click, and then when you click it, you say sets count of undefined. Okay. If you didn't have that undefined here, I believe TypeScript would yell at you because it's like, hey, you can't call set count with nothing. You have to actually provide a number. But for whatever reason, let's say we wanted it to be potentially undefined. And this makes more sense for like a person object. So like sometimes, like let's just say we had a name here that was like a string, say Bob. And this is just an object, the name string. Okay, sometimes we want to actually allow users to not pass anything. And I guess technically you could like make this optional, but I'll just make it explicit and say undefined here. Okay, so again, generics, that's why you kind of use them. But for the most part, if you can get away without using them, this will also achieve like the same thing. But all right, let's go back to chat. Is there anything else? Oh yeah, Abudi asked if I could talk about some of these things. Roasted AI. I watched Primogen's video on that. It was pretty funny. My preferred is inferred types. It just seems like it's you write less code and you get like all the benefits of TypeScript out of the box without having to write all this stuff. If you're doing like explicit types, it just reminds me of JavaScript, Java. I used to do Java way back then, and it's just cringy. Not to hate on Java. If you like Java, there's just so much extra stuff you have to write when you're doing with like C# or Java. It's just painful, in my opinion. But yeah, someone says, I think Uhal. He says, I think TypeScript is confusing if people try to do complex generics when there are no need to do it. Keep it simple. Yeah. Again, like for the most part, like generics are probably more for like a library. Like this is why I had to use generics here, because I'm trying to build like a use state function that React would allow you to pass in whatever type of state. And whenever you allow it to pass in whatever type of thing and you have to like return that same type, that's when you need to like start messing around with generics. Awaited, promise, return type. So let's talk about some of these little utility methods. Return type, I'm going to do the ones that I think are the most important. I haven't used awaited before, to be honest. But let's just go ahead. So again, let's say we had a function called run. And this thing returns an object that has a name of Bob and an age of 20. Okay. And if you think these little examples are too like, I don't know, basic, and you're not really learning that much because they're too basic, I can try to think of more like better examples. But anyway, so there's a utility called return type. Let's say you wanted to get the type of this run object, the thing that it returns, right? So if I say like results is equal to run, does anyone know how to get rid of this like warning? I guess I could just say cannot be compiled as titles. The reason it's complaining is because I need to like add an export keyword so that TypeScript thinks that this is an actual like ES6 module, and then it won't complain anymore. I have no idea how to do that. But let's take a step back. What was I talking about? So we have a function called run, and this run function returns a type of name that has a string and age that's a number. Let's say for some reason we need to just get the return type. Like we just want to get the type of this thing. And we don't want to have to go and like declare a new type up here. And like, how would you do that? Well, what you could do is you can actually say return type, and this will take in a generic, I believe. Okay, and then you also have to say type of. Okay, T returned, T run return type. feel like I'm having some struggles teaching right now. Okay, so we have a function called run. It returns an object that has name and Bob, or name and age. If we want to get the type of this thing without having to like explicitly state it somewhere, we can say return type, and then you pass it the type of the original function that you want to kind of like get the return type of. So now if you hover over this, notice it says it's a object that has name and age. And now you can actually like use this anywhere in your code base if for some reason you have to do this. I know it's a very obscure example, but I've actually used return type a couple times. It's actually really useful. And type of, I don't think I've mentioned type of, but if you have a function here, such as this one, and you just want to get the type definition of it, like you don't want the actual implementation, you just want the type definition, you can say type run is equal to type of run. Okay, and that'll give you back the actual full definition of what this function is. It's a function, you hover over it, the function that when you call it returns this object. Okay, and as I add options here, just go ahead and say like this is any or object just for the heck of it. Notice that those additional types in the parameter list are kind of added to that because I'm using the type of keyword. Okay, and then you can use this down here. Like I don't have to say type of again. It just makes it a little bit cleaner. Type of is also super important to understand. The theme I'm using is bearded theme, and I'm using the color stained blue. Okay, so we talked about return type. I think this one's pretty cool. So also, let's say we have, there's another thing called omit and pick and exclude. There's also partial. We should probably talk about partial. These are actually pretty useful, these utilities. So if you have a thing that returns a bunch of data, we could say like, again, hobbies, running, whatever. And then you have, what are some other things that like address could be a string, just say like 999, whatever. Yeah, that's good enough. So let's say you wanted to basically just create a new type using the original T return type here. Actually, let me make this a little bit more clean. I'll say this is I'll say T person, and then we're going to say name is a string, age is a number, address is a string. We're going to get rid of hobbies to keep this simple. And this thing is going to take in, I could say as T person. I'm just going to cast this. So this is something I didn't talk about though, but you can cast objects as like different types. Okay, so now that this thing before, let me show you. If I were to look at the return type of run, notice that it's an object that has like just explicitly named properties, name, age, and address. That's cool, but I want this to be more explicit, and I want to say this is actually going to be a T person. So now when I hover over this, I believe, oh, I guess it doesn't say anything. There's, let me try satisfies, hold on. Okay, I guess the type, it doesn't actually like tell you anything different, but the idea is that like you can actually cast the thing that's returned to be a T person using as, and as, you can also use satisfies that I kind of talked about in a YouTube short, I believe. Anyway, what am I trying to teach here? I don't even know. I'm trying to teach omit. Okay, so anyway, let's just say that you wanted to have a function I'll say function get minimal person info. Okay, this takes in a T person, and then we want to return a subset of like what the T person has. Okay, so we can actually say that this thing is going to omit a certain field. Like for example, it's going to omit address. Let's say we don't want address to come back. So we're going to go ahead and just return a new object. Now technically I would bring in like Lodash or something. I guess the easiest way you could do this is just say like name is person.name, age person.age. Okay. But the idea is you still want this to be like a type of t-person, but we're going to say this thing returns an emit t-person, and I believe you can pass it like a field. So I can say like address. And now if you hover over this, you will get back. Let's just go ahead and run this. I'm going to say get minimal min person. These examples are so convoluted. I'm sorry, I should have prepared for this, but you know my channel. I don't prepare for anything. I'm going to pass it a person here. Let's get rid of run. Const person is equal to this. Okay, and we're going to pass in person here. All right, so now min person. This thing only has age and name on it because we omitted the properties of address from the type that gets returned from this, right? And so now, like, the purpose of this is, let's say you wanted to write some function that like verifies that you never return a password. Let's say there's like, for some reason, you have some random password in here. And you want to make sure that the function never allows you to return a password. Okay, and for whatever reason, let's just say you did this and you're just returning person. We do this. Make sure I type in password here. Oh wait, this does not even work, huh? You know what? I don't know what I'm talking about. Ignore what I just said. Let's find a good example of emit, because I don't think I've been teaching this good. A TypeScript good example of emit. The idea is, though, is basically you create a new type and you just emit certain fields from the other type. But I can't think of a good example. Okay, they're using a user without email. So I was kind of on the same page of like emitting stuff from the user. I thought this would have complained though. Maybe I don't understand the difference between omit and exclude. I think exclude will actually complain. You know, I don't know. We're getting into realms of TypeScript that I just don't really play around with that much. Casting ignores the actual object. Okay, so if we don't cast it, okay, I just don't understand what I'm doing here. You know what? I thought of a better example. So let's say you're working with a database. Let's just rethink what I'm doing. Let's say you have a function called persist person, and this takes in a certain thing. If you worked with like MongoDB and you try to like save an object that has an ID on it already, sometimes Mongo will like throw an error and say, hey, you can't save this. It already has an ID. But you can't create a new object that has an ID. So let's say you have like, I don't know, some Mongo ID, which I don't know what it looks like. It's something weird. But this could also be like a string here. So when you try to persist this thing, and you just go ahead and say like run some Mongo code, if you just take in a person to save as a parameter and say tPerson, this will actually not work because you are providing an ID, but Mongo does not want to create a new person that has an ID on it, right? So I think technically what you could do is you could say that this thing is a tPerson omit. We might just run into the same scenario where I don't understand what the purpose of omit is at this point. Like, what is a real good use case of it? Okay, so I think if I were to say create person and I pass it person, okay, I don't know what the purpose of omit is. If it doesn't give you any like IntelliSense of when you screwed up, like what is the purpose of this? Do you have a TypeScript tutorial video on your channel? Actually, I don't have any TypeScript tutorial videos. I don't feel like I know enough about it to make a tutorial on it. Other than what I'm teaching you right now, I'm just kind of going off with the things I do know that I have used. But Marik, I don't know if I can explain what you just pasted because I can't even explain what I'm doing right here. So I probably can't, but we can look at it. I think you do have to use a never keyword somewhere though. Let me try to understand this a little bit. So type exclude T and U. T extends U. Never. Otherwise T. Exclude from T those types that are assigned to U. So let's try this one. Oh wait, no, this is what it does. This is like the definition of it. I could try doing that, yeah. So create a tPerson without password. Const tPerson type tPerson without password. Let's just get rid of the ID stuff. And you're saying then use that as a parameter for another function. Okay, so let's just use this. It doesn't complain still. It just like, do I need to reload my TypeScript server? All right, we're bringing out the big guns. We're going to bring back ChatGPT real quick. I'm just going to go ahead and figure out in TypeScript, how do I define, oh, you guys can't even see me type, can you? How do I define a type that will warn me when I pass in a password? How do I define a user type that, how do I phrase this? How do I use the omit keyword to define a new type from the base type of user that will warn me when I pass in a password into a function? Let's see if this thing can help me understand what the heck I'm doing. It says you can use omit. You call update user. This will cause a type error because password is not allowed in user without password. Am I crazy? Isn't that what I had? Omit tPerson and password. Okay. They are emitting user in password, setting that to a type. Okay, so emit removes the key from the object. So I want to use emit. Exclude is for removing types from unions. But still, like, what's the purpose of this? If I can actually still pass in a password here, like if I were to log this out, person to save dot, I mean, I guess it'll complain here, right? Maybe that's what the issue is. But often, I mean, you'll be doing another, like, I don't know. This is our function, but then let's say there's like a function save to Mongo, which just takes in a random object, right? And this thing, I guess the point I'm trying to say is that, like, this password is not actually, this isn't safe, right? This password is still passed around your whole code base, and it's not actually helping you in any way to know that, like, hey, you shouldn't be passing an object that has a password into this thing. Maybe I need to say, like, how do you make this strict? It does only complain, but password is still there. It's stuff like this that makes me want to go back to JavaScript, honestly, but I mean, there's no way. There has to be a way to, like, have this thing complain, right? Because if I were to say the same thing, I'm gonna make it explicit. I'll say, okay, I'm gonna make a new type. This is also something I hate about TypeScript. It's so hard just to run a TypeScript file. Like, I'm bringing in TS Node, I say run this file, it crashes. And it's like, okay, now I gotta go into my TS Node config, and I have to go and, like, I forget where you add it, but you have to add some configuration for, like, TS Node. Anyway, I'm just venting at this point. Okay, so let's say T person without password. If I do this, does this actually work? Okay, I'm missing something fundamental with TypeScript. There's a way to make this be explicit, right? Password never. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I should probably use TS Playground. Thank you, random person from Russia or wherever that language is. So let me try to think about something. Okay, someone's asking what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to use, I mean, maybe I can do this. Emit tperson password and extend it like that. Is that how you're supposed to do it? Is that the proper way to do that? I don't think using undefined will do it. Yeah, I guess that'll work too. Okay. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to ask. Abudi, you must have missed the whole thing. Watch what happens when I don't use emit. Watch this. You see how it's complaining right here because I'm passing a password into this function? If I get rid of this and, TypeScript thinks I'm doing something fine. Nah, Philippe, I think that's like, that's more error prone, right? Like it's not embracing TypeScript. TypeScript's supposed to actually like yell at you when you're doing something. I'm going to try taking this whole thing and I'm going to paste it in here. I'm going to say rewrite this code to make the last function call to create person throw a TypeScript error because the password was set on the person event. Y'all having some fun watching me learn some TypeScript? What's wrong with using never? Did this thing really just comment out password and that's the solution? This is why ChatGPT will not replace us. Okay, its answer to what I asked it is it just commented out the password for me. Let's try it again. How do I make TypeScript give an error if I define a type using omit when password you know, I don't know how to even phrase this question. Maybe that's why ChatGPT can't figure it out. I'm sure there's a blog post that does this. TypeScript, how to omit password from an object and have TypeScript throw errors. Yikes, look at this. Skip that one. Isn't coding fun? The new omit type does not restrict the omitted keys to be keys actually present on the given type. Okay, so that's like kind of what we're seeing. There should be some avenue to express omit, but only the keys that are present, like either a change to omit or some other omit-like type. Public props. Yeah, this makes sense. 76 upvotes. This got merged in. Did they add a stricter? I was disappointed when I saw the omit type added. It was not strict like the one suggested. Ooh, a strict omit. Do they have a strict omit? Probably not, right? How do I make omit strict in TypeScript? I guess my question is, how do I make TypeScript expect an object that only has the keys that it expects? Right? The fact that if I were to add more stuff to this, like let's say I did this, and then I said like, I don't know, whatever. Does this still pass? Yeah, this one doesn't work because it's expecting a T person. You don't think this GitHub issue is exactly what, I mean, there seem like they're asking for. Oh, this is how you do it. Isn't this fun? I think they're saying you do this. Pick type of exclude T of T person. Emit T. The T should be and K would be. Nope. Anyway, I guess it's not that important to get hung up on. It's just one of those things where it's like, dude, you would think the emit helper function would like actually be useful. But now I think about it, it's like, what is this? What is the point of this? If you can't even like have it tell you when you're passing something you should not be passing because you like admitted it, then like, what's the point? Thanks for the emit strict helper. Who's Sean? Sean's F. Kelly. Apologize for. They're saying you have to do all this. Hold on. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. If anyone figures this out, like, leave a comment or join my Discord and let me know. So, I mean, Jason, like, emit is just removing the key, but it's still a valid type of T person. But this, if I add something to this, it's no longer a valid T person, right? If I do a spread operator on this and I say ABC, whatever, notice that this actually complains because this is not a valid T person. This thing requires a T person, but if I add random fields to it, it's not a valid T person. Same thing if I were to like, I don't know, if I define a new person that doesn't have the address here, it's not valid. Okay, so TypeScript is smart enough to know that like I can only have these three fields on it, right? I can only have those three fields. But the moment I pass in person, it thinks that like this is valid, but it's not because this has a password on it, but I'm telling it to omit the password. So I guess the lesson to this is don't use TypeScript. Go over to Rust or something with actual like real strict language. Try object in T person without password. You're missing a comma in row 30. Huh? Okay. Hold on. I don't know if you guys, I don't understand what you guys are saying. If I have a function here called run, takes in an options object that has a name, which is a string, and an age, which is a number. Okay. And I call run, and I pass it name, Bob, age 20, and I add another one called like height 60. To go against that point you made, Wetzer, you said there is no exact types in TS. An object type is always a minimum requirement. You can always add property types, but you can't. I can't add a property type here because TypeScript says this thing is explicitly only needs 2 keys on it. It has 2 properties, name and age. If I add more things to it, it complains. If I remove something from it, it complains. So I think the issue is with emit. Like there's something about emit that I don't understand. So maybe let's try using omit and pick in combination. I want to see if I can figure this out with a different approach. I mean, that's what he's doing here. Omit strict is basically picking the object, excluding person is a T person. I just did this. Does that change anything? But T person still has password string. Should I move on from this? I don't know if there's anything really else I wanted to like teach in TypeScript. I mean, like you can do a partial. So again, like if you just get away from this whole password thing, like you could potentially say any of these things are required. Like I'm just going to move on. This is just too frustrating. Like let's say you had a function that you can update people. So let's say update person, and this takes in a new person like this, and let's say it does some database call to update. Let's say it's like a patch, you know, I'll say patch because that's kind of like when you just want to update individual fields. The idea is if I were to call patch person, but I just want to update the person whose name is Bob and I want to change their address to something else. Okay, the issue with this why is this complaining? Oh, because I don't have the function keyword. Okay, so what I'm trying to show right now is there's a partial. So let's say you wanted to allow someone to update a person. Let's say there's an ID too. Like let's say you have to have an ID of like 1, 2, 3. Okay. But this doesn't work because this requires the full T person. But if I just wanted to update maybe the address on that person with the ID of 1, 2, 3, you can actually do something called a partial. And now this thing will work because person, basically all of these become kind of optional, right? Now, technically you want the ID to still be required. So I'm not sure how you could do that. I guess you could say ID, and this is like a string, that if you were to not put the ID in, it would complain to you. But partial is a way to basically make all of these kind of optional, and people can pick and choose what they want to send in. Now, again, they can't send in things that aren't defined because that'll complain, but they can, you know, if they just want to update the address, they could just send in the address and make sure that ID is also set because it's kind of required. There might be different ways you can do this as well, but that's kind of how you do the partial thing. Go back to what you had before when you said you couldn't add more things. Okay. Let's go back. Okay, so Wetzer 96. To answer your question, this is the example I talked about where when you have a function that requires an object that looks a certain way, you can't add new things to that object, right? The TypeScript will complain to you if you try to add additional fields to it. It'll also complain if you try to remove things from it, right? If I remove age, this is no longer a valid options. That's kind of what I was saying. It's like TypeScript is strict in that like you have to pass it the object it expects. Let user password string string const user with. I mean, I'll copy your code in. We'll play around with it. Let's see. Let's see what. What's the code that you're sending me though, Wetzer? I'm not sure what you're trying to get me to look at. We have a type user like this that takes in a password and a string, and then we make a random object that can take whatever. But if you try to type this as a user, it'll complain. I mean, I don't have a project. I'm literally just playing with TypeScript files. So you can go to like TS Playground and play around with this. You know what I mean? So like what I'm trying to do, I can paste the code to you all. No error even with extra properties. Wetzer, I'm not sure what you're talking about. You see how I have an object right here and I type it as a user? If I add properties that don't exist in the type definition, it complains because it's not proper. Use this, forcefully emit. Let's try that. Forcefully emit takes in, it does an emit, and then it does partial record K never. Partial record K. Okay, let's try this again. I'm going to say password is a string. So a T user, our user can have a password. Oh, there's already password here. Yeah. Has a password and a username. Okay. So then let's say we had a function that is not supposed to take in the password ever, right? Make sure you get rid of the password before you call us. So I'll say update. I'll just say send email with user info. How about that? It's a thing that we're using to potentially send out some user information. You want to make sure that password never leaks, right? This thing takes in a user, which is going to be a forcefully emit. We're going to get rid of password and see what happens. And let's see if this thing will actually complain if I try to call this with the user. So I'll just go ahead and make like a user up here. Yeah, let's do this. I'll say password is 123, username Bob. There we go. Thank you so much, Alexandru Timoth. If I could give you $1, I would. So let's try to understand this. Why does this not exist in TypeScript? Like this has to be a use case that's actually used all the time. You know what I mean? Like why would you not just provide a forcefully emit or strict emit in your actual like language? You still can't use the password prop within that function because you omitted it. I'm not sure if I understand what you're saying. You still can't use the password. My name's Jeff. Oh, did you already paste that? Jeff, I'll give you $2 then. Wait, where did you paste any code? My name's Jeff. I don't see any code from you. I'm scrolling back in chat. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, so thank you all for helping me out with that. Just kind of annoying. Like, does no one else think that's kind of annoying? Like the fact that I had to find some snippet from someone online and paste into my code base to do something that should be kind of basic in your typed language. But I mean, let's try to understand this. Maybe I'm just complaining because I'm a noob. So we have a type that takes in a thing, a type, that also takes in a extends type of t. So this takes in properties that have to exist on t. So if I were to add another one called like whatever, this complains. Okay, so I think technically you don't even have to put this extend stuff. I think that's just like some sugar they added to make it better. But basically they omit the field from the original type, but then they do a partial on the original type. Oh, I'm sorry, they do a partial using the field you omitted, and they say that you should never have that defined. Okay, that makes sense. Now, I wouldn't have figured it out by myself, to be honest, but now that I read the code, it makes kind of a lot more sense. We take two types. One doesn't have password. One has a password that's set to never, I guess technically. You could say this is undefined as well. I guess it's never is probably better. Okay, but I think, yeah, the people in the chat solved the issue, so I definitely appreciate you guys pasting that snippet to help me understand what the heck I'm doing. Try passing to that function an object with password, and it won't let you console log password if you try. I mean, it's letting me console log password here. Let me go back to the have it how to did like the extend stuff because that wasn't complaining before. But this was what I wanted to achieve, right? I'm calling a function. It's saying you can pass me a user object, but you better make sure you never have that password set, because if you do, you're probably going to leak a password to someone via the email that you're sending. Okay, so that's what I wanted to achieve. I think it took us like 30 minutes to arrive at this solution, thanks to let's see who he was in chat. Alexandru Timoth pasting this in chat. So yeah, there is no exact types in TS. An object type is always a minimum requirement. You can always supply additional properties. Copy these messages into your code. Okay, I'm pretty sure I just copied the exact same code, Wetzer. I will do it again. And if this lights up my editor in red, I'm not going to listen to messages from you again. If it does, you'll become a VIP. We got a VIP over here. User with favorite color. As you. Well, that's not, I don't think that's what we're trying to achieve though. Let me help you understand what we're trying to do. I don't even know what I'm doing. I wish chat didn't take so long for messages to come in. Like YouTube's stream chat is just so slow. Nah, I don't like streaming on Twitch, to be honest. I don't really like Twitch as a company, but that's just me. Okay, Wetzer, I think I understand what you're saying, and I apologize if I was not understanding what you're saying, but I think I understand what you're saying. Basically, when you assign a type of object and if you have an object that has less things on it and you let it equal to something that has more things on it, it'll let you do that because it satisfies the type, right? Like you have a subset with a lesser amount of properties, but that still works. Or JS Playground, TS Playground. Well, I think the issue I see with Twitch is like it's originally a community for gamers, and most gamers are like super toxic young kids who like I don't know. I know there's like a programming channel now on Twitch that you can actually stream to, and there's probably more like quality people watching coding there. But when I think of YouTube, I think about like its primary thing is like education or like one of the primary things. Twitch just I don't know. Let me stop talking about Twitch before I decide to actually start streaming on Twitch again, and they ban me because I said bad things about Twitch. How do you okay? Unexpected token export. Change the module settings in CommonJS to allow top level exports to work in the playground. Is there a disconfig? There's no way to clear this. Is that the clear button? So this thing, I mean, this will print out the full user object, right? TypeScript isn't going to strip anything out for you. All right, let's just try to, I'm going to use what we just learned. I'm going to say strict emit t k equals, see if I can do this off of memory. Let's see how good my memory is. So that was basically an emit. Take the t and emit the k, and then combine that with partial. I think they did record. A never. Okay. Types opacity property password are incompatible. The string is not assignable to type undefined. Okay. How so though? Well, I know if you were to run this code and like turn off checks, I guess Wetzer, can you explain what you mean? Even with strict emit, you can encounter the same issue though. Like I understand that this thing, like if you were able to just run this code and not have it run the type safety checks, then yeah, this would still print out the user with the password, right? What am I using to see the logs? I'm just on typescriptlang.org. Thanks, Tina. How y'all doing down there? I'm probably gonna wrap this up soon. I've been struggling past like hour with a really simple bug. But I think I've learned some cool stuff today, to be honest. Is there any other things in TypeScript you guys want to try to like learn together or just like play around with? I think I covered a lot of stuff. I'm sure it's not an exhaustive list of all the things you can do in TypeScript, but yeah, I don't know if there's a phone that's smaller than 300 pixels in width. I don't see any links that you send. I don't think links are even allowed to be sent in chat for security reasons. Oh, of course, Cooper peed. Bye. All right, love you. I'll be down soon. I'm running out of steam. Might have to go to a Starbucks if you know what I mean. Oh, Wetzer, are you talking about this link at the playground? Like, can I share this link with you? I'm not sure if that's what you're asking. I have a problem with objects with arrays in them. Keep getting per object possibly undefined. You have like an example code or something? Hey, thanks, bro, man, for watching. I'm glad you enjoy some of the stuff I publish. Anyway, what are some other cool things to learn TypeScript? Yeah, can you, Wetzer, I don't know, do you have Discord? Can you join my Discord and just send me a direct message and I'll just click on the link? I'm trying to think if there's another way you can send me a link. Or give me like a teeny URL or something and you can just like type out the... Yeah, if you can, don't paste the full URL, just like use teeny URL or something and then paste in the hash or something. Sketch solution. I like the naming of that. Sketch solution. So if I were to... I don't see any my props. So this is a React functional component. And this thing takes in, I guess, a solution in addition. If solution is equal to null, then return, otherwise const. gonna be hard because now you have to send me the type of solution and then the type of partition, and those things will probably have more types. So I don't know if this is gonna be easy to help you debug, to be honest. Let me go to my Discord real quick. All right, let me not open this up in chat in case it's something bad. But it is TypeScript lang.org, so we should be good, right? I'm gonna go over to a different terminal. Not that I don't trust you, Wetzer, but I don't trust anybody. Okay, I think it's good. So let's go ahead and look at this. Sorry. Just the name. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So like you do all this work to like make sure that the thing only accepts. Yeah, that's kind of problematic, isn't it? So then really there's no point to even doing this whole partial thing. Like you should just have your code just omit password, right? Like this thing right here, like kind of sucks, but you just rather it say delete user.password or something, or just do a spread and say user without password is equal to user password undefined, right? Kind of unfortunate that TypeScript doesn't like can't allow you to do that and just like bypass the typing. There's no way. So there's no way to like force this thing here to like actually verify that the thing passed in matches the interface exactly. Like why would this thing not? I guess that's like I'm not understanding about TypeScript. It's like what's the point of typing your languages if there's no typing safety for different scenarios like this? Like if anyone can just make a random object like this and pass it to a function that has no password. Wait, hold on. Yeah, because we basically you're tricking TypeScript to think that this thing only has a name, but like if you were to console log this, I bet you it would print out the password, right? Yeah. But this is something that you have to like explicitly add into your code, right? Like, is this even a smell? Because you shouldn't be like messing around with just like plain objects like this, I wouldn't think. But yeah, I guess everything's a scenario. You always need to make sure that you just be explicit and delete the password inside your function and just verify that like if, I don't know, user.password, I don't know, throw an error. But yeah, it's kind of icky though. It kind of just, TypeScript, like you're saying, TypeScript is definitely better than JavaScript, but if you're going to embrace a typed language, you kind of wish that it was actually like fully typed and not like you can like lie to it, which kind of sucks. Which now I'm starting to realize why people really like Rust. It kind of makes sense. Does adding the keyword with this fix it? Where would you add the as? Like here? I mean, that still doesn't work. That doesn't work. Yeah, I mean, you could just put any here, and that. Why would that? That's so frustrating. I need to go and take an actual course in TypeScript, because it's like if you could just literally say any here. Well, I guess any obviously is a hack that you can do to like make it all work. So never mind about that. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna wrap this stream up though. I hope you guys had fun watching me learn some new stuff, and you guys learned something along the way with me. I think I've solidified my knowledge in TypeScript one step further than it was before, so that's good. Yeah, I haven't really messed with Go anymore, but like I really liked Go. I feel like it was a much more elegant type system than TypeScript. Not the bash TypeScript, but like the longer you work in this JavaScript front end TypeScript ecosystem, the more you just want to kind of get out of it. Because it's like, it just feels like a bunch of hacks built on top of hacks. But it's what pays the bills, so it's like I'm kind of stuck there unless I want to completely switch my career path and try to go work as a backend engineer as a Go developer, or a backend engineer as like a Rust developer. Because I don't think there's that many jobs that do like Go and Rust with whatever front end languages. Yeah, I think you sent me some Kotlin code before and it looked pretty elegant. I have nothing against Java. Well, I have everything against Java. Like this, it's just too much syntax. But I mean, there's tons of systems built in this world that use Java as the backbone. So I don't think Java's that bad. Bro, man, I'm also confused why it doesn't throw an error. Okay, and this is the thing that we spent almost like an hour on in the stream trying to figure out, like, is there a way to make this function smart enough to not allow you to pass random objects that, you know. Actually, if I just do this, does this complain? I mean, that one complains, but I mean, you can always bypass this stuff. Just say as any, boom. You've already introduced like a potential bug into your system if you rely too much on TypeScript as being its like your checks. Like you always have to have some type of real checks against secure things and make sure they don't leak out. But yeah, I don't know, Daria. Maybe we'll just have one of those days where it's like I'm just sick of all this stuff. Like you spend like 2 hours trying to set up a tsconfig file, and you're just like, dude, I'm over this. I'm just over all this configuration. I'm over all the like the edge cases you have to think about. I think that's one reason why I really like Go is like they're very. I feel like they're very strict in like their language, and like you can only kind of write things the way that they expect you to write things. But anyway, Wetzer 96, I want to say a special shout out to him for helping me understand TypeScript a little bit better. It took us a while to get through. It's very hard to chat over these delayed live stream chats, but I think I understand what you're saying, and it definitely makes sense now as to the issue. And then also a special shout out to, I think it was Alexandru, who sent me a snippet about the forceful emit, which kind of helped me explain something that I was trying to explain. But if you guys like watching the stream, thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe, press the bell icon. I have a Discord channel that you're welcome to join if you just want to find a place to talk to other developers, or you can also just send me a message, and if I have time, I'll respond. But yeah, I try to stream on Sundays around, I shoot for Sunday mornings. It depends on when I wake up. Today was like Sunday at 10:30 or 11. But yeah, I hope the guys see you next Sunday if I stream again. Have a good day. Happy coding.